All right. Okay. All right. Hmm. Peace. Today's a knowledge day, so I wanted to come on and just build for a bit. Peace, original man. So you already know. Now, instead of doing this on a consistent basis, I randomly do these lives just to keep y'all informed about some things that's going on and to just share some perspective based upon my experiences. So, as you see in the title, today I wanted to just discuss knowledge being a compound word composed of two words, know and ledge. You can kind of see it in two different ways, meaning no ledge or no limitations, no boundaries, no restrictions. Or you could also look at it as knowing those boundaries, those limitations. And that's the approach that I wanted to take initially, just discussing the importance of being conscious or aware of the limits or the limitations that we set up on ourselves when it comes to us achieving our goals and being successful in our undertakings. Um, that ultimately starts with us. It requires a lot of self work, a lot of self analysis, and it's a very challenging and difficult space to be in because it requires a high level of vulnerability. And one thing that I've kind of learned from experience is that you oftentimes may see people who have a hard time being by themselves. And usually people have that difficulty being by themselves because it's easier to be in spaces around other people and to hear the thoughts of other people outside of them as opposed to dealing with their own internal thoughts. Oh, okay. Peace, Saladin. I was told that the lessons are for the youth. Is that right and exact? Lessons are learning tools. And as a learning tool, that is not specific to a person's age. I teach 4 and 5-year-olds lessons. And based upon meeting people where they are and what's developmentally appropriate, a lesson is applicable regardless of what age you actually are. Now, if you're talking about the lesson specifically in terms of 120, there's not no age limit on that. Just because you're young, it doesn't mean that you're able to process and unpack and receive 120. No, you can be in your 50s and because of your life experience, um, maybe your academic trajectory, whatever. It may give you an opportunity to learn lessons in more of a readily accessible way than a younger person that doesn't have life experience or is not really on an academic trajectory. So it really doesn't matter what age you are. A life lesson or a learning tool is appropriate regardless of where you are. Peace, harmony. So yeah, I've seen quite a few people, and we have ideas. A lot of times, we have goals, we have aspirations, and in a lot of instances, we become our own worst enemy, or we get in our own way. Some of that is fear and insecurity, because sometimes if a person is accustomed to living a mediocre life and having access to things that are standard or normacy, depending upon where they're at in life, them being presented with certain type of opportunities that may be considered greater than where they're actually at, some people may sabotage those type of opportunities because there may be fear associated with, now that I have what it is that I say that I desired, now what? you know it's kind of like people that I see that invest in a wedding, but they really didn't put much thought into a marriage or a lifelong partnership. They only plan for that day. And now that they're on that path of lifelong partnership or an actual marriage, it may be difficult for some people. So some people, success is more fearful to them than failure. And that is also something that, as Black and brown people, we have historically had to deal with, living in a society that has consistently othered us, oppressed us, looked at us as less than. And we've always had this fight in terms of a sense of identity, where we live in a society where even the iconography or images that we see within maybe a religion that we're raised in, we don't see positive images of ourselves. We don't see a lot of positive images of ourselves on television or on social media, or any of these various different things, where other people, they don't have that problem. They see themselves in positions of power or in positive lights all of the time, and that reinforces their sense of confidence and identity, even if they ain't got the skills, even if they're not qualified. They have all of these examples around them that reinforce who they believe themselves to be. And many of us grow up in environments or societies where we don't see that. Some of us may not even see it in our own household. And that's just dealing with the visual aspect of reinforcing a positive self identity. I'm not even talking about the language. Some of us grow up in a household where the language doesn't even support our own divinity, or we're not constantly being reinforced or encouraged around those ideas of who we essentially are. So it's a fight. It's an internal fight that we consistently go through. And that internal fight that we consistently go through is always going to be reflected externally. So people oftentimes say, yeah, we manifest things that happen in our life. Yeah, but in a very practical way. If I walk outside of my door and I have Volvos on my mind, I'm probably going to see quite a few Volvos throughout the course of the day, because that's what I'm looking for. That's how I'm orientated. If my mindset is I don't trust nobody, people always out to get me, this, that, and the third, I'm going to come across people that's out to get me, and people that I shouldn't trust throughout the course of my travels, because that's how I'm orientated. So our mindset sets the foundation for how we attend the world and how we navigate this landscape of life and how we interact with others on this map of human geography. And because of that orientation, we set the tone for whether we create heaven in our life or whether we dwell in hell. And there's many of us who just can't get our minds right. And the essence of that essentially is having knowledge of self, knowing who and what you essentially are, which is beyond your name because you were who you were before you were even named. You were who you were before you got your public official position, or before you got this title working for this company, or before you became this entrepreneur, or you became this athlete or entertainer. You were who you were before any of those things. Before you got money to buy a certain type of wardrobe, or if you got certain type of body altering surgery. I'm talking about before all of that. Most people don't explore or examine who they essentially are. They define themselves according to all of these various different layers that they put on top of who they are, which is essentially just a shell of the essence of who and what you are, which is infinite potential, which is supreme intelligence, which is universal consciousness animating this form. So because people don't identify with the essence of who they are, everything else that they identify themselves with is flawed and limited. So when you look at the word knowledge, it has two words in it: know, the ledge. Most people define themselves according to the ledges of who they are, the limits of who they are, not the knowledge of what they know or the awareness or the consciousness that underlines the significance of those ledges or those various different aspects of who they are. Knowledge or awareness is intangible intelligence, it's consciousness. We are consciousness within this form. Some people in their religious systems call it spirit. Some people call it breath of life. Some people call it a soul. Some people in metaphysical systems call it intelligence or consciousness or whatever you want to call that intangible essence of who we essentially are. That is what gives life to this particular form. Most people only identify with the form. So when it comes to knowledge or knowing a ledge, they constantly come to these limits in terms of self-definition. And usually when they come to those limits of self-definition, it's ego shattering because their whole identity was wrapped up in that position. So if they get to a point where they have to resign or they're fired from this position, some people can't take that because their whole identity was wrapped up in that one aspect of who they are. Or if they're a parent and their children essentially leave the nest and their whole life has been focused on just being a parent, it may be very difficult for them now not to be in that specific role because their whole identity was based upon that. Or people who have never had a consistent employment history. They've never really worked like that. But then they find themselves in a situation where now you have to get a job. You have to be employable. That's challenging for many people because they've never seen themselves in that form. So even when you're talking about the different 99 attributes of Allah, when I say Allah, ALLAH, I'm talking about arm, leg, arm, head. When I'm talking about all of those various different attributes and components of who I am or who you are, particularly as original people, more specifically as the original man, you have many of these various different attributes or aspects of who you are, which fits a certain situation or scenario. What do I mean by that? Sometimes you're required to be all eye seeing or understanding in a situation. That might be required in that situation. You need to be more understanding. But in some situations, it's not about you being more understanding. It's about you having a totally different type of posture in terms of meeting what that situation demands. It may be about being more wise in this situation. Not being understanding of this person, but just being wise in how you even handle or engage this person. So there's certain attributes that apply to certain situations. Now, if you're a person that just looks at yourself as one thing and that's all you are, you're going to constantly be blindsided by life. And that's what you consistently see people going through. When people have this mentality like it's not one thing, it's another, and there's always something happening, that is because they have a one size fit all perspective of life. And they're not striving to do what the situation demands or being fluid in a sense where they're able to meet things where they require to be met at. So instead of them doing what the situation demands or doing what's appropriate, they're still striving to force this circle in a square peg hole. They're using the wrong application and the wrong procedure for the wrong situation. It's like when you look at a home that's being built, you have many different elements to that home. Um, you have the electrical aspect of it, you have the plumbing aspect of it, you have the carpentry aspect of it. You have all of these various different elements that are required to build this structure. And if you just went into that with a one mentality approach, like I'm just going to do carpentry, your plumbing ain't going to get done. And when you get to a situation where you require plumbing, guess what? You're going to be stuck in a situation. Your electrical needs to get done. So you can't just go into building this structure and just not consider the electrical work that's necessary or the plumbing work that's necessary. There's going to be something that's missing. And you will get to a point in that road where you're going to be blindsided by the plumbing work. You're going to be blindsided by that electrical work. And that's oftentimes where people find themselves in life. They have a very limited perspective of who they actually are. And when a situation comes about, oh, I'm just nice. That's just not how I am. Well, you can still be nice and assertive. That don't mean you got to be mean to people, right? Some people, they think if they're not nice, then they're just going to be mean, right? But it doesn't mean that. It just means you can still be nice, yet be assertive to people. Peace, yes. No, not right in the middle of what I'm doing. No. Uh-uh. Because look at the clock. We already had this conversation. Don't play me. So yeah, knowledge is a compound word. No ledge. And the ledges that we set for ourselves, there's a lot of fear oftentimes associated with that. You know, sometimes people have a fear of heights, and we reach certain precipices in our life, or reach certain places in our life where it's kind of, man, it's you looking over, man, like I don't want to fall off. And some people are more fearful of losing an opportunity or falling off than it is stepping into their greatness. And I see that all of the time. All of the time. I'm always in a position to be able to assist people and to provide opportunities for them to do certain things. And I have a very keen sense of fear, a very keen sense of fear. And I see it over and over and over again with our people and people in general, where there's a clear path to opportunity. They make up all excuses in the world. Why they're not able to do this, why they're not able to do that, why they can't do this, why they can't do that. I see it over and over again. But that's a them issue. That's something that they have to work out within themselves to know and understand that they are actually worthy of these type of opportunities in life. And that's not something that can be taught externally. I mean, we can help encourage and reinforce a person's identity and even the things that I'm talking about right now. I can say in all of this, it really means nothing until it's actually internalized and processed from the inside out. I'm just striving to reaffirm and confirm some of the things that are necessary for us to be successful in our undertaking. So it all starts from within. I mean, even when you see an explosion, that was an implosion before it exploded. That happened internally before you witnessed what happened externally. Our ideas are the same way. The successes that we have in life are the same way. The failures that we have in life are the exact same way. Now, this doesn't exclude people who live in this world or in this society that deliberately strive to create roadblocks to limit the successes of other people or the opportunities. Because you have some people that will strive to take the things that I'm saying and use it as a way to erase racism or global white supremacy or sexism or all of these other different isms that some people are as equally invested in as an ideology as other people are equally invested in an ideology of access and opportunity and success. So even though all of this starts from within, it also requires a level of wisdom of how to navigate. So knowledge is not knowledge without wisdom. Knowledge is the foundation. Being aware of the limits that we set for ourselves and those ledges that we set and how to actually overcome those things that we've internalized about ourselves, that's the foundation. But once you've established that foundation, you have to consistently reinforce that foundation because that integrity or the constitution of that foundation can erode over time if you don't consistently reinforce it. So you have to consistently learn things and add on knowledge to that foundation and explore things about yourself that helps you grow. That is a part of the process. But in doing that as knowledge, you move into that space of now applying that knowledge, which is wisdom or right discernment. How do I navigate and practically use what I know in this world and navigate this landscape and to understand the various different landmarks along this landscape, the things that are there that help encourage and reinforce and add on to what I'm doing, and the things that are deliberately on this landscape that are impediments, that are specifically put there to strive to undermine my efforts. Wisdom enables you to navigate, to rightly discern who you need to associate with and who you don't need to invest a lot of time searching for different opportunities or qualities or support in people that it does not exist in them. Wisdom allows you to do that. It allows you to practically apply what it is that you know. So while knowledge is the blueprint or the map, wisdom is the terrain. And I say this all of the time. The map is not the terrain, and the terrain is not the map. But you need both in order to successfully navigate. Because the successful navigation of utilizing the map, along with being able to traverse the terrain, enables you to see things for what they are, not what they appear to be. And that's what understanding is. It's just as simple as 1, 2, 3: knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Understanding is a composite of simultaneously understanding the map or the blueprint, but also being wise enough to know how to navigate the landscape, and realizing that there's certain things that map does not point out. There are nuances. There are certain conditions that you can only experience on the terrain. That is the reason that 3, or understanding, is considered the best part, because it is a composite of what you know and what you practically have experienced. You literally can see it. But if you just have a map and you ain't got no experience, you're not going to see it, because you ain't gone nowhere. If you think you just got experience without the map, you still ain't going to see it. But you need that combination of the map as well as the terrain or the experience in order for you to properly understand and see things for what they are, not what they appear to be. But it all starts with knowledge being the foundation and knowing the ledge or the limits that we set up on ourselves and where those limits come from. You know, did we grow up in an environment where in our household there wasn't a lot of positive reinforcement or encouragement in terms of what we had aspirations to do? Did people constantly shoot down our ideas? How was our experience academically? Was that traumatic for us? We have to examine all of those things in order to know the ledge. And one key in order to find out what those ledges are is to examine how we feel. Why we feel a certain way about certain things, where it actually comes from. That's self-work. But sometimes that self-work may also require some professional assistance. Sometimes we may literally need to go see a therapist to help us process and unpack the ledges that we set for ourselves and where they actually come from. Sometimes we may need to do that. But the goal in knowing what those ledges are is for us to ultimately know that there is no ledge, that there are no limitations. The only limitations are the ones that we set up on ourselves, because we are infinite potential. We are supreme intelligence within this form. We give life to this form. Those of you who are a part of the church, I say it all of the time. It tells you right there in your Bible that you're made in the image and the likeness of God. That is your essence. And anything you identify with other than that are ledges or limitations that you set for yourself. And because it is a limit or a limitation, you will always come to a place in your life and on your road where you're going to be blindsided by something that does not coincide with the way that you set that identity. What do I mean by that? Just look back a few years ago with this pandemic and the shutdown. Some people had to shift their entire worldview based upon not having the capacity to do the things that they've always only known to do. Some people couldn't handle that. Some people were able to pivot and to find things within themselves that they never knew was there. When people were in lockdown, they weren't really able to come outside like that. And then when things started to open up a little bit, many people started to see the beauty of the public parks in their own cities. Whereas before, they may have never walked outside into a public park or took their children there. But because of the circumstances, that gave them an opportunity to see another dimension or aspect of who they are. They were forced to know that ledge. That's knowledge. That's awareness. That's consciousness. That's information. It's information, but it's in that form. It's in that experience. It's in that moment. So that is really the foundation. And like I mentioned, with any foundation, you have to constantly reinforce that foundation to ensure that it's strong, because its integrity can erode over time. Its constitution can erode over time. And you constantly have to reinforce that through learning, through experience, through exploration, through curiosity. Because without that, and that foundation eroding over time, that's when you start to see weakness. So I'm gonna take that as my sign that it's time. So I just wanted to come on briefly and just build with y'all with just some things that was on my mind, and willfully it was inspiring, empowering, and educational to those of y'all that just took a moment to listen to what it is that I had to share. You could always reach out to me at atlantisbuild@gmail.com. I strive to my best to get back with you as soon as possible. And I appreciate y'all just taking the time to tune in briefly. And whenever I got something else on my mind I want to share, I jump in here again. So thank y'all and have a beautiful night. Peace.